So hello and welcome to another Veterans Virtues with me, Sergeant Lamb. Today I'm here interviewing Staff Sergeant Kreithoff. Staff Sergeant, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, indeed, Sergeant. My name is Staff Sergeant Kreithoff. Even though most of the persons in the unit are not able to pronounce that name correctly, they'll just name me Staff Sergeant Kreithoff. I've been platoon sergeant for BP1 HQ for 8 months currently.
Fantastic. We always like to start these interviews off by getting a little bit of background information. I've been looking through your squad history in the unit, and I've noticed that in contrast with our other guests, you've been a member of just 2 squads your entire time in the unit.
Yeah, and always S3.
Can you tell me a little bit about DP1S3 and perhaps how that compares to BP1S3, the squad you were most recently SL of?
The difference is that during DP1S3 times, I've been most of the time a rifleman, a heavy, and then a ASL. It's only during BP1S3 times that I reached the position of SL. There were some differences though during that time. Well, during the time of DP1, we were a lot together, since it was a whole platoon that transferred over from able company towards dog company. We were all together. We knew each other together already, so it was easier to just already work. And once we switched over to Baker, there were some elements from all different platoons that started to come together in that platoon, and we had to rebuild the whole platoon and rebuild the platoon spirit too inside of that.
And so you've seen a lot of changes within the 29th over your career, but equally, having been in Darkest Hour the entire time, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes within Darkest Hour itself. How has Darkest Hour changed over the last 4 years?
I would say 2 big changes. The first one has been that during that time there was an update in Darkest Hour that changed a lot of things around. Added the mortar, for example, tweaked a few of the gameplay mechanics, so we had to relearn that. But that isn't the biggest change. The biggest change has been, I would say, the community. The player base has been reducing a bit. It isn't as horrible as people tend to think, in my opinion, since we always manage to get some full pub servers. Otherwise, yeah, it seems the player base changed a little though with the arrival of younger or more players that tad less respectful than previously, but overall the changes in the game itself didn't really impact a lot.
Having been there for 4 years and seen all these changes and the changes within the 29th, when the time came that a lot of 29thers had, perhaps almost 2 years ago now, when there was the choice as to whether people wanted to move to the new games, Red Orchestra 2 and Arma 3, or to stay in Darkest Hour. Obviously, you were one of the ones who stayed in Darkest Hour. What was it that sort of made up your mind to stay?
I think the biggest thing has been the gameplay of Darkest Hour. I mean, I'm not wanting to talk down the gameplays of Arma 3 and or even Arma 2 and RS or R2, but the mechanics of DH really attracted me. So I mostly stayed in DH because of the gameplay reasons, and also because we were in a squad that we really liked each other, and we all thought to be staying together in DH because well, we just worked fine together. We didn't really see any reasons to change. I mean, I liked the game, I liked the squad I was in, so I didn't really think about changing.
So you stayed because of your friends, not just because you were good at Darkest Hour and not very good at the other games.
Exactly. I stayed mostly because of the friends. The gameplay mechanics were much. I mean, they were a factor also, but they were less a factor than the friends I had in DH.
So, roughly how many people are still around in Baker Company as of this moment?
As of this moment, we have currently 112 members left in Baker.
That is fantastic. You see, a lot of people outside of Baker Company and outside of Darkest Hour have a perception, as we've just mentioned, that the player base is gone and that there's no one left playing it. So what is the public community like in Darkest Hour, both in terms of public play and in terms of scrim-ready units?
I'll start with scrim-ready units because it's actually the easiest by that. We currently have a few realism units going around here and there. We had a few scrims, but the problem with those units is that most of them we've encountered have been disbanded and reformed. They don't really form stable units at the moment, or at least I don't have information to give out on which unit has been stable for the last years, actually. So in terms of realism units, they are currently trying to form. It seems trying to settle too. Granted, we have the only pub server up most of the time and filled up to the maximum on most of the time, so might be a little difficult for them to recruit and have a constant flow into the unit too. In terms of public players, there hasn't been a big change around that. There's been a bit more discipline problems in the pub server, for example, with the pub players. That has increased a bit, but I wouldn't explain it on the fact that it's only the base that changed a bit, but also because of the reductions of the companies, we have less admins onto the service too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a big difference from what I've seen. But you mentioned there'd been a lot of scrims with other units, and I've been looking through your personal record, and you've actually been a very lucky guy. You've been part of 3 different scrims for the 29th. Do you think you could take us through those different scrims?
Yes. The first scrim was against 113 Cav on the map Stavlo in DH. They came with 14 guys. We were 20. The fight was capped at 20 guys on both sides. It was basically an AD over the whole map. One side had to defend the west of the river, and the first round, the 29s had to attack. We managed to win pretty fast. We had a big push all over to the end of the map, and the second round we defended. They unfortunately didn't manage to reach half of the map, and their team was wiped out. It was a kind of a disappointing scrim for me because, well, I was kind of hyped to take part in the first scrim, and it was the kind of scrim where I didn't see any action. I didn't see any enemy during the whole fight, which lasted for about 1 hour for both rounds.
If I can just mention there, I actually was at that scrim, and notably I was our only casualty on the attack round, if you remember that one.
Oh, definitely, Sergeant. I remember it. We actually had a partial casualty. The only loss we had in our squad was one guy that crashed. That has his game crashed.
But presumably then, the scrims since then have been somewhat of an improvement.
Oh, definitely they were. Our second scrim, I took part with BP1, with second lieutenant back in the day, Patterson, in the lead to prepare that scrim. Was very action packed. Was very tense scrim. It was an AD on Puteron-Bessin with 3 objectives: the Silo Tower, Breadfield Roads, and the Crossroads in the northeast of Silo that need to be defended by one team. It was a 32 vs 32 player scrim. Both teams brought their 32 players in. We started as defending, as allies. The first round went very weirdly, to be honest. We sat there for 10 minutes not hearing anything about the Axis team, not even hearing the sound of their half-tracks. And at some point, suddenly, at the 10 minutes mark, they just unleashed a hailstorm of bullets on our positions. Unfortunately, as impressive their assault was, they got Most of them got killed on the open grounds, trying to approach buildings and try to get a foothold in there. And the round was pretty fast over after that initial assault. The second round, we had to attack the town as allies again, with 3 half tracks, 1 for each squad. And we decided to have a three-way attack to the country of the Axis team that was attacking as a whole group, packed together. Our squad, I was squad leader back in day of that squad. So our squad had to take the northeastern approach and basically take the crossroads, which we managed to do rather quickly. We had some trouble. The Axis gave some resistance in, and at some point we managed to capture the crossroads and turn on to Bradfield Road, which we managed to capture too. And in the end, we won that attack round too, although it was a much closer win than the first round, which was a blatant victory for us. We had no losses in S3. Most of our members came out of that scrim with 2 or 3 kills or even more, and that was it for that scrim.
It sounds like a good one. And I see, looking at your service record, that fairly recently you were actually involved as a reserve in BP2's 29th ID sort of Normandy campaign.
Yes, indeed. That was the most surprising scrim I had to take part in. Basically, as BP1, we knew more or less the scrim was going to take part on Omaha. We trained BP2. We basically always played as Op4, and during the night of the scrim, like 30 minutes before, Baker Platoon 2 was missing a few of its members. So they asked around if some members of BP1 might want to join the fight, and I responded present. I attended the scrim. It was a very interesting scrim. It lasted was actually one of the longest scrim I took part. It was only one round, which lasted 4 hours in total, I believe, or even longer. It took us already 45 to 1 hour in order to prepare for that scrim. And once the scrim launched, the fight was very heavy. I died at some point 1 hour and a half into the scrim, charging up in the middle. Salvaged a sniper rifle from the platoon sniper that died, and died flanked around by a German. But overall, the scrim was very interesting to see. The Allies actually managed to capture the objective area. The Axis retreated from there, and were just picking off Allied members all over the place during hours, and at some point mounted a counterattack, which partially failed. And the scrim finally ended into a draw, I believe, with two allies alive in one building and 2 Axis alive in another building.
It sounds like an absolutely epic scrim. It sounds like they're getting better and better each time.
Oh, definitely. It was very interesting, but it was very. It was like the second scrim was kind of a sprint. Short rounds, and the third scrim was more like a marathon, because we had to be very patient. There was like places of very high action, and then it just silenced down for 30 minutes, and just everybody trying to spot enemy players, what were their movements, without really a lot of information going around.
So, also looking at your service record, I notice, as I think we alluded to in the introduction, you are now a platoon sergeant. Although in the first 2 of these scrims, you were a squad leader and an ASL. What's the biggest difference between your old role as a squad leader and your role as a platoon sergeant that you've been doing now for the past few months?
I would say that there are 2 big differences. The first one is that you're more distant to your old squad members. You tend to be 3 drills per week. You take a little bit of distance because you can't always come down to their channel and have a chat with them. well, not always when they're there, because, well, you have some paperwork to do. Basically, the paperwork increases as you go up the ladder. But still interesting paperwork to do. The other thing is on combat level. Basically, you have to completely change your mindset. Like when you go from rifleman to squad leader, you basically do not think only about yourself, but you just lead and fight with a whole squad in your head. So basically, your squad members become more or less your hands and foot. And when you become a platoon sergeant, you have to take some distance of that micromanaging, and you just have to give out general orders to the squad leaders and have a bigger trust into the capabilities of each man. It's a challenge though, because you have 30 men to manage around on and off the battlefield, and gives out a very interesting job to do too.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant Krotov. Before we go, I have a question which I always ask people at this point. What is the single best piece of advice that you could pass on to new 29th members?
I have one right in mind right now. It's basically broken down into two things. I would say the first thing is to be patient. Patience, everything will come in hand when you want it. Do not lose patience, because 29th is really asking a lot of patience. So things are not going to change in the time space of 1 week. You're more talking about months or even years. So just basically show your best. Do not expect anything in return, and just be patient. The efforts will be rewarded in the end, always.
Excellent stuff. And again, thank you very much, Staff Sergeant Krotov. I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you too, Sergeant.